Just want to say good morning and thanks everyone for coming. My name's Lon Whitman. I'm the director of the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute. And we're going to do some preliminary welcomes and introductions. So I'd like to start by inviting Mayor Shea Lundvall to the podium here. He'd like to welcome everyone to Gillette and thank you again for coming.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to see everyone. As Mr. Lon said, my name is Shea Lundvall, and I have the distinct honor to welcome you today. So I appreciate you all being here. We are at the Gillette College, and what a great facility we have for you to enjoy and be a part of. So thanks for being here. It is truly fitting that today we gather here at Gillette College Technical Education Center to focus on the future of energy innovation. Wyoming has always been defined by hard work, resourcefulness, and collaboration. And this industry forum reflects exactly that spirit. The Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute has brought together leaders from across the industry to spotlight projects that matter, not just to companies, but to communities and to our state as a whole. From the Skull Creek Field NGL EOR project with Sunshine Valley Petroleum and X-Oil to the Alpha Field Enriched Air EOR initiative with ATR partners, to the work with Merit Energy and Polymer Technologies to repair casing hole leaks. These efforts demonstrate the power of partnership. They show how EORI and our oil and gas operators are working shoulder to shoulder to find solutions, strengthen production, and move Wyoming forward. And it's not just about the projects themselves. It's about ensuring that industry and policymakers alike understand the value of this work. Having the opportunity for dialogue, questions, and shared insight this morning is exactly how we keep Wyoming energy strong. And as Mayor of Gillette, I am proud to welcome you here today, and I encourage you to lean into the conversations ahead. The work we highlight today will echo far beyond this room. It will shape Wyoming's energy story for years to come. Thank you for being here and allowing me to welcome you today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, we'll keep things moving. I'd like to introduce Commissioner Paul Ulrich. Paul is a VP with Jonah and one of the new members of our commission. We're going to explain a little bit about EORI, the commission, how we operate. So I'm going to start here with Paul and welcome you up.
Lon, thank you. Good morning. I wanted to start out, and this will be very brief. I wanted to cover a little bit of the history of EORI, the impacts to the state of Wyoming, and most importantly, from my perspective, where I see the next 20 years going. So, as most of you know, EORI was established via the legislature in 2004. And I think, Peter, you were part of that process. Eli, I know you were. Clearing Law, Tom Struck. Who am I forgetting? There's a couple others, lots. Oh yeah, Senator Hawks. Had a vision for Wyoming that has been realized over the past 20 years. And that vision was very, very simple. You know, there was very clear and is a very clear understanding in the oil business that there's a lot of reserves left behind based on technology that was implemented at the time those reservoirs were drilled and the technology that we're applying today, and certainly as I see it, the technology we're going to see in another 15, 20 years. So with that incredible foresight, they formed the EORI. Over the past 20 years, the EORI, with a $53 million investment, roughly 4.7 million biennium of state funding, has generated $558 million in taxes alone in 20 years. Anybody want to guess what the rate of return of that is? 952%. I can't get over that number. I mean, those of us in the oil and gas industry, Boy, if we hit 30, 40%, it's a great day. If you look at the investment Wyoming has made in enhanced oil recovery and the team Wyoming has put in place to help us as an industry execute on that, the returns clearly demonstrate that that incredible foresight 20 plus years ago has been realized and will continue to be realized. The numbers are honestly staggering. What I think is most important about those numbers are a couple things. One, the net gain of investment of 505 million in the last 20 years is tax revenue only. Can you imagine the jobs and the direct economic impact to Wyoming that EORI has brought to the state? It's staggering, and we don't even have those numbers. I suspect, Lon, they're a little bit bigger than 505 million. Yeah. So I want to congratulate EORI on more than a job well done. And most importantly, I can't wait for the next 20 years. What you're going to hear today demonstrates some amazing tech and new thinking that is going to continue to unlock the tremendous reserves we have in Wyoming and benefit every single one of us in the community, in the industry, and certainly in the state of Wyoming. So if I have any parting message for those of you that are involved in the legislature in one way or another, this is a success story. We need to keep it going. Lon, thank you.
Good job. Thank you, Paul. He mentioned EORI starting in 2004. Actually, how that all unfolded was state statute that was creating the Enhanced Oil Recovery Commission. EORI became the operating unit of that commission. So we have a commission of 8 by statute. It includes the governor, state geologist who's here. We also have one legislative person that's put on by the Management Council. Representative Reuben Tarver is here. And then 5 appointed by the governor with oil and gas background, largely is important. All 5 of those are here. So take time if you'd like to meet these EORC commissioners. I'll run through the names. We also have former chairman and commissioner from the beginning here. So our current chairman of the EORC is Bob King, who's in the front row here. Sitting next to him, a couple over, Eli Bebout, that many of you know, former state legislator for many years, Speaker of the House. Every capacity in the legislature was carried by Eli. Chad Brister, Vice President from Merit Energy, is here. Ken Hendricks, many of you know him. He also is on the Oil and Gas Commission. So we have one commissioner that sits both commissions, EORI, EORC, and Oil and Gas Commission. And Paul Ulrich that you met. So we've got a quite important and strong commission that's very involved. They're all oil and gas background. They watch and ensure that the mission of EORI is followed and maintained. That mission is to minimize stranded oil in conventional reservoirs in Wyoming. And as Paul mentioned, the budget that we've received through the EORC, $53 million from 2004 to 2024, on projects that we worked on directly with industry, like the things you're going to see today. Those projects, collaborative work together, EORI with industry, brought the state tax revenue of $558 million. So we look forward and we anticipate that number increasing. There's a lot of great projects in Wyoming currently. The Institute has 18 collaborative projects going right now, and that's an impressive number, particularly for a team of 11. And most of the team are here. We've got petroleum engineers, petroleum geologists, and then an incredible data team that supports that. We're located in Casper. We share a parking lot with the Oil and Gas Commission. We collaborate closely with Tom Kropatch, who's here, the supervisor of the Oil and Gas Commission. That's a regular interface on projects between EORI, the state, Oil and Gas Commission. So collaboration is part of the background and what we do every day. Collaboration is incredibly important. If you haven't worked with us, I'd encourage you to reach out, visit that booth. We've got all our system put in place there, so you can see some of the things that are available online. The little brochures that were out there have quite a bit of data and information in it. So I'd encourage you to do that. We're really pleased you're here today, and we're going to try to stay on schedule. We want open dialogue. You'll have plenty of time for questions all through the program, and we'll aim to be finished at 11:30. So with that, I'm going to call up Deputy Director Roger Hillebush, and we'll launch the actual reason you guys came, and to see 3 of the 18 projects we're working on with the operator speaking about how that worked with EORI. How does that interface work? How do these projects unfold? So I think you'll find it interesting, hopefully, but we will have plenty of time for questions, and we want those. We'd like to have you interact with us. So welcome, Deputy Director Roger Hillebush.
Morning, everyone. Once again, I want to thank everybody for attending today's EORI Industry Forum. We're very pleased that you're all here. My name, again, is Roger Hillebush. I'm the Deputy Director of the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute. I oversee the operations, data, and technology team at the Institute. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to showcase 3 industry collaborative projects that'll provide you some insights into the activities and recent developments in enhanced oil recovery in Wyoming's conventional oil fields. Each presentation we're aiming to take no longer than 30 minutes, followed by a 20-minute question and answer period. You can also find a little more detailed information about the projects in the EORI Industry Forum booklet that you should have been able to get up at the registration table. This has a little bit more information about it in it about the projects, and also expanded information about some of our speakers today. Also, if you have additional questions after the forum, you can go over to our display and information booths over here and visit with us. To get things kicked off today, the first collaborative project presentation we have is the Skull Creek Field Natural Gas Liquid Enhanced Oil Recovery Project. This project utilizes NGLs for enhanced oil recovery and is located within the Skull Creek South Unit, which lies within the Muddy Reservoir in Weston County. Industry partners with the EORI for this project are X-Oil Development and Sunshine Valley Petroleum. The presenters for this project today are Elio Dean from X-Oil Development and SureTech Inc., and Stephen Whitaker from the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute. Elio Dean is the Chief Technology Officer at X-Oil Development and President of SureTech Inc. And Stephen Whitaker is a Senior Petroleum Geologist, who has been at the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute for about 8.5 years. He also has over 47 years working as a geologist in the oil and gas industry. So please welcome Elio Dean and Stephen Whitaker.
Well, thank you. And I thought I'd preface this talk with a little saying that I like, came from a renowned geologist decades ago, Parquet Dickey, who said that we usually find oil in a new place with an old idea. Sometimes also we find oil in an old place with a new idea, but we seldom find much oil in an old place with an old idea. Several times in the past, we've been thinking that we were running out of oil, whereas actually we were only running out of ideas. So what's key here is that new ideas and new methods are critical to improving oil production in Wyoming. And that's basically why the EORI was founded, was to help the operators test these new ideas and methods. So as far as NGLs go, we know that natural gas liquids are a known solvent for oil. We also have been finding out that NGLs were very expensive to acquire. That's why they weren't used with EOR for all these years. But because of the advent of the plays in the unconventional reservoirs, they are now producing a flood of NGLs into the U.S. So it is now abundant. That's driven the price down. Plus, the industry has developed infrastructure. So they're piping these NGLs to areas that can now be approached, so we can use them in some of our fields. Now, a couple of positives about NGLs. they're able to be utilized in low pressure fields that aren't really suitable for factors like CO2 flooding and things like that. Also, NGLs are compatible with existing field equipment. You don't have to refurbish all your field equipment because the NGLs might rot them out, like is the case with CO2. So that's very helpful. But in order to help reduce the economic risk of any of these programs, we really need to evaluate the data. And the more data we have, the lower that economic risk is going to be. Plus, we need to use modern methods, sound geological and sound engineering practices in order to implement these programs. So understanding the detailed geology of any reservoir is going to be a prerequisite to conducting a really effective EOR program. And you have to understand what the plumbing is of your reservoir if you're just going to start putting fluids in there and trying to sweep the oil out. So here's a map that shows the muddy fields in the Powder River Basin. The muddy's made over 300 million barrels so far, and yet some of these fields are still containing 80 to 90% of the original oil in place after the initial production phases are done. So obviously the muddy should be a major target for EOR efforts. CO2 EOR is not really feasible for many of these muddy fields because the fields are too shallow, they're too far from pipelines, they're too small, and CO2 is just too doggone expensive. So we're always looking for other forms of EOR to be used here. Now, the NGL EOR project at Skull Creek is going to be the first significant attempt to determine if this method will be economical in Wyoming. Now, also on this map, there's a cross-section going from Kitty Field here just west of Gillette, 70 miles to the southeast of Skull Creek Field, just to get a framework for what the geology looks like. And what you see here is over at Kitty Field on the left, we have a pretty full complement of the muddy formation there where you have all four major members, the Spring and Ranch, Ute, Cyclone, and Recluse. But as you go to the southeast and you get the Skull Creek Field on the far right on this cross section, we're only dealing with the upper members of the muddy, just the Spring and Ranch and Ute. So here's a type log from the field. There's a map here on the right. The little red dot there at the top is where this log is from. So we can use these logs to map out the reservoir quality. And you'll notice here that I've subdivided the Spring and Ranch into 4 different intervals and the Ute into 4 different intervals as well. And we can map each interval and determine how much of a contribution these things are making to the overall production within the field and where we might be able to enhance the production. So here are the maps made for each of those intervals, just showing the net sand thickness. You see the Spring and Ranch is kind of scattered around, not a significant contributor, but the other Spring and Ranch members are shown on the top tier. You can see how that's distributed. And again, the upper Ute down there in the lower tier. And what was most interesting to us as we were analyzing all these things was the upper Ute D, the lowest member of the muddy over there in Skull Creek. And this shows more detail of that map. So that's the distribution of just this interval here. And the red dots over the wells indicate the wells that are perforated and producing from this interval. So see, there are a couple of wells highlighted there that are now plugged and abandoned, but they should have been perforated in this interval and weren't. Unfortunately, they're plugged, so we can't have access to them anymore. But the more significant thing that this map shows is that there are no injection wells in this interval. There's been no pressure support for this thing, so there's been no injection directly into this interval at all. So one of our first recommendations to the operator, Sunshine Valley, was to convert one of these existing wells in the lower D here, upper D, to an injector to get some pressure in there. So this interval was selected for a pilot for the NGL effort because, well, it covers a relatively small area. So it won't take a lot of NGLs to have a big impact, and we can see very rapidly how effective this is. And based on that, we'll know whether we can upscale this to the whole field. Also, because the original operator apparently failed to provide adequate pressure support in this particular interval, it's probably got a huge amount of stranded oil left in here percentage-wise. So it makes it a very effective target for EOR. And my portion of the talk will end with this last saying from Henry Ford, that if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you already got. And obviously what this just means is if you're not happy in your lot in life, you need to change something. And it's the same thing in the oil business. You cannot keep doing what you're doing now and expect oil to increase. We have to come up with new and innovative ideas. So with that, I'll turn it over to Elio Dean here to cover the real details about the NGL effort.
Thank you, Steve. All right, well, there's two key items I want to just take from Steve besides the whole geologic introduction. But he did mention this is the first significant attempt of an economic project. What I'm going to show you is that this is actually the 4th attempt within this field. Okay, and so that's going to be hopefully get some interest there, and we'll touch on that key aspect, which is the economics The second topic is modern technologies. Today, compared to 60, 70 years ago, I think we're better at more horsepower. That's what we can do, bigger fracs. But we also have a lot better computing power. Numerical modeling and numerical simulation is one of those advancements that it takes seconds to run simulation models today that took hours 30 years ago. And so those are two key concepts that I want to add to this, because as I walk through the four projects, the four pilots of NGL for Skull Creek, I want to emphasize that we took advantage of the computing power of today. So we actually history matched and modeled each one of these projects. And the idea is we're trying to capture key calibration parameters for our project, which is the fourth. And so the first one, let's see, I guess my laser pointer is not very strong. On the far, so pilot one is NGL production. This is what everybody does when they think new technology. Let's go put it in a project and let's see what it does on the production. Okay, this particular project, you can see on the right, here's kind of a schematic of some of the wells. Far right, we have injection wells. Far left, that's dipping, we have a contact, but right there in the middle, this area has been watered out. And 3 wells were selected. The red and the green are the ones that I'm evaluating on this plot. So only 2 to 3 wells. The third well is this black one here that had a little bit additional production, but I'm just focusing on these guys on that side. We have full field model. We were able to extract a sector and calibrate the performance of this pilot. You can see what we have, we've slabbed it out, but you see that this is oil in green, water is in blue, and there's 2 dominating zones, okay? And from those 2 dominating zones, what we learned in the performance was we went from about 2 million barrel pour volume down, only about 40% of that actually contributed to the production, okay? So this performance right here is a fraction of actually what was in place. And one of the reasons is we have too much contrast between the zones. If you remember, Steve mentioned all these different zones we have. So what we learned from this pilot was, let's focus on one zone. Let's get away from too much uncertainty, and let's try to recreate this for pilot number 4. And what we're seeing here is that this was a watered out section of the field. It was producing 25 barrels a day, and we took it up to 350 barrels a day, okay? This is a first pilot success. You look at it and you say, that's what I want. Now, what nobody talks about is the economic side of it. There's a lot more to just economics than production. But let's touch on the second pilot, okay? The second pilot is injection, okay? Can I inject my solvent? Can I really displace and put the energy in the reservoir that's necessary? Okay, for those who don't know, Skull Creek is part of the Clairton Trend, and they're all really just one gigantic field, and it kind of outcrops by the Black Hills. Okay, and so as you go closer to the Black Hills, you get shallower, and the viscosity skyrockets. So we have about 300 centipoise is our viscosity, and in this section of the field, it's only about 400 feet deep. None of the wells produce on their own. And so the first effort was to have 4 wells were drilled. All of them were tried to turn on. None of them would turn on because of how shallow it was, the high viscosity of the crude, and you're there. So what's necessary? Well, can we inject into these high viscosity reservoirs? And the answer is 2,400 barrels of NGL went into well number 3, and that was able to diffuse, right? This is like dissolves like. It's a solvent between crude and NGLs. And what that did is it was able to put the energy in the reservoir for each of the surrounding wells to start producing at 25 barrels a day. Okay? Short-lived, right? Because only 2,400 barrels of NGL were put inside the reservoir. But the concept of, can I inject this agent, was checked off. Okay? So that's pilot number 2. Amongst the technical guys, they all get geeked out and excited. What do the business guys say? Did you make any money? Right? What's the economics? So that's where we get into the next pilots, right? The third pilot is not an economic pilot, but it's trying to pinpoint more of the understanding of the technology, okay? The saturation changes. One of the very common tests and methods of testing EOR technologies is a single well chemical tracer test. very well known. And so we went and in one of the wells of Skull Creek, we did a single chemical tracer test. For those who don't know, there's a group that just outside Laramie with Charlie Carlisle's group where they do single chemical tracer test, and you inject a partitioning tracer. So you'll inject water, do a partitioning tracer, flow back, and what that gives you is a high confidence saturation, residual oil saturation to water. Okay, and on our test, we got about 31%. We then injected NGLs, followed by water, partitioning tracer, did the flow back again. It's a measurement, it's a value. And in that test, we got 5% with plus or minus 3% uncertainty. With modern tools, what do? We built a simulation model, we calibrated it. This particular well, we had the core analysis. So we were able to merge together the results and the core analysis with numerical modeling to be able to understand how are we displacing. So we're looking at oil saturation, blue's water, and you can see where we're displacing the oil with the NGLs. And the most important part is that with the calibration of the simulation model, we were able to get the endpoint of the rel perm curve necessary for our forecast and our simulations. And for this to match what we saw, we needed a residual oil saturation of 3%. Okay, this is where the technical folks geek out and they get really excited. And the reason is our reservoirs in the muddy are typically, I would say, in the 75 to 80% initial oil saturation. Residual oil saturations are about 30 to 40%. Okay, so our mobile oil is anywhere between that range. Our fields have only produced about 10 to 20% of the oil. Our oil saturations are 60% or higher. That is a staggering number of amount of oil that's trapped there. And if we can bring that to 3%, which is that's not practical. We're not saying we're going to get down to 3%, but if we can get it from 60% to 20% or 30 or 40%, those are significant values of incremental production. Okay, and this is where the technical guys get excited. The business guys, what do you think they say about this? They're like, it's economic. And that's what gets us to pilot number 4, which is our project at Skull Creek. We are here to test economics. There's 4 hopefully clear objectives. So the first one is to produce incremental oil of 20%, if not greater. The single chemical tracer test and the previous pilot results indicate we should be significantly higher than 20%. We're realistic. We live on Earth. We want to keep our feet on the ground. We're setting the bar at 20 is what we're shooting for. The second one is we want to demonstrate the infrastructure capability. This is one of the toughest ones for economics, especially with these mature old fields. Are flow lines good? Are the heater treaters good? Are the production batteries good? Or do I have to scrap everything and put everything fresh and new, which has a huge capital expenditure cost associated with it? The third objective, and this is probably the most important one, is can I migrate reserves? If you can migrate reserves, and remember, we're not saying we're going to migrate from contingent resources to proved reserves, but if we can migrate to probable or possible reserves category, all of a sudden we get the investors now talking to us more serious. And with this particular project being the 4th, with similar, and as long as we can demonstrate that the other 3 are consistent, we now have what we need to migrate reserves, to get the reserves report, to get the investors excited. And that's when copycats jump all over and they're like, oh, well, he's making money, then I'm gonna do it. That's the story of the unconventionals. 4th objective is clearly to provide public benefit to Wyoming, because Wyoming is assisting us and they're doing the matching funds through the WEA grant, which has been a major part and that's allowed us to get to this point. So we look at Wyoming through EORI as well as the WEA as it's one of the most supportive states and really one of the reasons why we are here in Wyoming and rather than anywhere else. So let me get you a update of some of the issues of where we're at, right? So the first one is, when I'm thinking about economics, I have to be practical. We're working with Sunshine Valley. Wayne Newmiller's here. Wayne is a practical gentleman. He's been in the business for several years. I am a reservoir engineer who's, I guess, quasi-geologist because I'm overly optimistic and excited. We need practical, real people to keep our feet on the ground, to say, that's a little weird. Because we're planning on injecting 500 barrels of NGL a day for about a month in order to get the volumes that we need. 500 barrels a day is 2 truckloads of NGL. We're not tapping into the pipeline yet. That's what the next phase would be. But 2 truckloads a day in Wyoming sounds great on summertime, but we have winters also, and we got mud season also. And so all of a sudden we have to start taking into consideration the logistics and the operations that impact our economics. And we started doing these different sensitivities of looking at continuous NGL versus a WAG system. Now, one of the beauties about WAG started in the 1970s, and it's been one of the great ways of implementing projects for CO2. It allows you to reduce the amount of CO2 that's necessary, as well as to provide some conformance to that gas overriding issue that we often see. And so applying WAG for a solvent flood we're seeing the benefits in the simulation model as well. And you can see there, we're planning on taking this section of the field from 0 to over 200 barrels a day. And if we have to deal with operational issues where we can't get a truckload for 1 day or 2 days, that's okay. And then here you can see the impact of the NGLs that we're injecting, right? So if we're doing 500 barrels a day or 250, and then you can see what the production of those NGLs would look like. So it's, we're injecting a lot, we're producing, but one of the key aspects is that we're producing those NGLs back, we're not losing them, and they are an asset for the project. Okay, so where we are today, one of the issues, or one of the items, so if I just go back real quick here, you can see this pod has 4 wells. Our original plan was to make this guy the injector well, produce, but one thing we learned from the practical side is we don't have enough divide between the upper Ute zones to be able to put a packer with confidence to only isolate the injection to the upper Ute D. So what we did is we switched to this well as our injector, and that's what we're looking at here. You can see here we've got clear kind of divide. We can put a packer, isolate the upper Ute D, allowing us to inject into this zone. So that was one of our changes. Unfortunately, we have a casing hole. Luckily for Polymer Technologies, which we came across casing repairs through EORI, we've been able to get with them, and we're planning on doing one of these. We have a permit or a sundry submitted, and we are waiting for approval. The second it's approved, we're fixing this well so we can move forward with the project. Injection pumps, batteries, heater treater are all salvageable. That's got us excited. Okay, we had the heater treater kind of taken apart. They peeked into it, and they said, we're still good even though it's pretty old. Our flow lines are not salvageable, okay? And the more we look into things, this is something that I would probably apply to any mature asset. You just don't want to risk it. Your flow lines, one flow line goes out, you've got big problems. And so for us, after doing some tests, we just said, you know what, we're doing new flow lines, period. Finally, our next steps. So once we start injection, we want to determine what our water cut is and what the pore volume. If you remember, Steve Whitaker mentioned that this zone has never been water flooded. Surely there's probably been some water migration into it through crossflow, but we don't know what the oil cut's going to be. So once we start the water injection phase, we'll be able to identify that. And then with water injection, we can start identifying what the pore volume is. We'll initiate the NGL injection. Really, it's the 3rd quarter or 4th quarter 2025. We're hoping for by the end of October, but it's all about that permit to get our casing repaired. We'll calibrate our simulation model as part of our monitoring program, and our key objective is to confirm that NGLs are a universal EOR technology. And that's really opens up the world to all of Wyoming. High pressure reservoirs, low pressure reservoirs, heavy reservoirs, light reservoirs. If you have residual oil saturations above 20%, I would argue this is a technology that we can look into. So the other aspect I'll say is I'll give the names to the 4 pilots. So the first pilot was actually Adena. For those who don't know, in Colorado, Adena is the largest conventional field outside of in the DJ Basin in Colorado. It's a muddy Newcastle reservoir. It's just called the J Sand. Okay, they had their pilot in 1962. The second pilot is LAK Ranch. which is, here's the Claritin trend, Skull Creek's here, and that is, the pilot was implemented in 1959. And then we're the ones that implemented the SCU 42 single chemical tracer test. That's in Skull Creek. And then pilot 4 is this one that we're doing right now. So hopefully that kind of gives a little bit more detail to understand where I'm coming from. Because if this pilot, or when this pilot is successful, that opens up every acreage of the muddy Newcastle for this type of technology. And then the big question turns in what's most economic. Trucking large volumes is not very economic, but the whole reason we selected Skull Creek is you have the Bakken pipeline. All of the Bakken NGLs that are taken down to Oklahoma through One Oak, they run right next to the field. That's why we're starting at Skull Creek. And so with that, we're open to questions. I'm also around afterwards, so tackle myself or tackle Steve Whitaker or Wayne Newmiller. Also, he's part of the group, so grab any of us if you have questions. But I'll open up for questions now.
All right, thank you, Elio and Stephen. I'd like to take the time right now too to acknowledge one important thing that Elio mentioned in his presentation, and that was the funding that he was able to receive from the Wyoming Energy Authority. As you heard, it was a critical component of moving forward with that project. And I'd like to point out that the Wyoming Energy Authority is a critical partner with EORI. And we have the Energy Authority Director here with us today, Rob Krieger, in the back. Rob, I'd like to thank you and your office for supporting these projects and allowing Wyoming oil and gas operators to get some of these projects off of the ground. So thank you. Okay, for our second collaborative project presentation, we have Troy Skitt of Merit Energy and Daniel French. Daniel's filling in for Tristan Hauser today, who couldn't be with us. Daniel French is with Polymer Technologies. Troy Skitt joined Merit Energy in 2017 and is the operations engineer for Merit's Bighorn Basin assets. And Daniel French is vice president of IOR Solutions for Polymer Technologies and focuses on building client relationships by identifying opportunities to improve asset performance and economics. Troy and Daniel will be presenting on using polymers for casing hole leaks. Merit Energy, in collaboration with Polymer Technologies, has implemented a gelled polymer process to remediate casing integrity issues. This process has been employed throughout the Bighorn Basin as inclusive of all injected formations. Please welcome Troy Skitt and Daniel French.
Thank you. Perfect, perfect. It takes a village. It takes a village. For the last 15 months, something my mother-in-law has regularly told my wife and I as we embark on raising our first child. And I get to thinking about that. The more you hear it, you appreciate everything that goes into raising your kid, all the help that you get. You realize you don't have to do it by yourself. And ultimately, having more hands helping makes things go better. And if I were to translate that to business terms, it's a simple one word of synergy. When I think about what we're doing here today, I think about the oil field in general, but particularly today, and I see EORI, I see Polymer Technologies, and I see Merit, that is synergy. And EORI has been a consistent for several projects that we've been involved in from a synergy standpoint and helping drive our technologies. We're thrilled to be here today. We're thrilled to be servicing the operators in Wyoming. And with that, I'm going to jump right in to our presentation. I guess we should go forwards, huh? Sorry, I don't know if I messed that up. Great start. So just a background for Polymer Technologies, we're very much focused on EOR, IOR applications using polymers. Just walking through some of the steps in the process is the life cycle of the assets that we touch. You know, a lot of folks, you guys are all familiar with primary, secondary, tertiary recovery. We have applications that touch each of these portions of the life cycle. Very familiar with that. And really where we shine is generally been in the secondary process, but what we're talking about today is going to be the casing leak repair technologies. Something that we take pride in to ensure that we have success is following a pretty stringent process and making sure that we understand what the problem is, making sure that we develop a strategy with the operator, get a good solid design together, and then implement the project. Ultimately, the goal, recovering more oil and improving the economics around that asset. Some of the key components of that success going into that is, again, identifying the problem all the way through, making sure that we're implementing that in a safe way. So where we've really shined in the past, I guess I've failed to mention that we've got the original polymer guru in the audience here. It's Randy Prater. He's founder and CEO of Polymer Technologies, a wealth of knowledge, all things polymer, all things oil field in general. But polymer's been his bread and butter for, well, I kind of hate to say, it's been a while. 52 years. Yeah. So what we've been focused on historically is the conformance improvement in the water shutoff using bulk gel systems, what we're calling the WaterCut HT, and Capit systems, where we're implementing those with our equipment, specialized polymer, selected crosslinker, field technicians. We're putting that in on the producing wells as a water shutoff mechanism to selectively reduce the water in that well, and then thus increasing the oil that's being produced. A couple other things that we have is the in-depth sweep improvement when we're trying to get further penetration versus the bulk gel systems, where we've got our CDGs and the low dose crosslink polymers as well. Those are generally implemented on the injection side in conjunction with the WaterCut system for conformance treatments to make sure that injected fluids are as efficient as possible in contacting productive portions of the reservoir. We've also got some clay stabilizers that have been very successful in Wyoming in particular in helping reduce improve injectivity in those high clay content reservoirs. We've also got some nanosurfactants for wettability alteration. So we're trying to bring as much as we possibly can to the table and things that really bolt on well with our gel polymer offerings. Getting into the reason we're here today, the casing leak technologies, this is a high level overview. I'll get into each of these, but the perm block gel, it's a low molecular weight gel, and that's designed to help with the smaller apertures. Basically, if you can get a pump rate with water into that, we can get the perm block in and get it to set up and seal off that leak. The leak block HD is for the larger apertures, and then the PAG system is utilizing that leak block HD and leaving that in the tubing casing annulus for MIT H5 on your injectors and disposal wells. So these would be instead of your common methods of cement or mechanical liners and patches. So I touched just briefly on the perm block. It's ultra low molecular weight. It's got a pumping viscosity that's comparable to water. So it's very low viscosity. However, it sets up as a ringing rigid gel. So this is a great system for those tight leaks. When we're looking at isolation methods to squeeze these treatments, we're also able to skip the drill out process, which can be fairly costly when you're looking at these fairly deep wells up in Wyoming. Going into the leak block HD, we're using the ultra high molecular weight gels mixed with cellophane, and that's going to help with the larger, really loose leaks where even cement can't hold. So that's gonna create a strong gel, not rigid ringing like the perm block, but it's going to be a very strong gel in terms of gel gratings. So similar advantages from the standpoint of a isolated squeeze method where we're skipping the drill out on that process. Cost advantage. So the protective annular gel system, we're utilizing that leak block HD system that I just covered. This is for the MIT and the H5 for your injectors and disposals. What's interesting about this is when we're going to pump this, you're going to have your entire injection string at your entire well is going to be set up to go back on injection prior to us pumping it. So there's a lot of cost savings and some advantages to that Troy will cover in their experience. And so we're placing this down the tubing casing annulus, and we've been very fortunate to get approval from Wyoming Oil and Gas Commission. I believe that they're favorable towards this technology. And one of the things that they've requested that is really a highlight for this technology is they've requested a transmissibility test where prior to latching back on, jaying back on, we're going to pressure, once we've placed the gel, we're going to pressure up on the annulus and have pressure gauges on the tubing annulus. And when those equalize, we know that we have transmissibility. So this technology does not bridge off, it does not hide a problem, and if there is another leak, it won't hide that problem either. So we're truly solving that casing leak issue, and that's been a nice test for us to prove that this technology has great efficacy. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Troy for his case studies that'll hopefully give you guys a little bit more insight into how the technology works.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, like he mentioned, like Daniel mentioned, we're just going to go ahead and take a look at some case studies here and how Merit has implemented specifically the PAGS treatment for repairing casing integrity issues. So for Merit, all these are in the Bighorn Basin currently. We've treated 6 wells to date. We've done more within our company, but this is focusing on Wyoming here. The Phelps 25, Spring Creek, I won't go through them all, but Oregon Basin, Byron, and Hamilton Domefield. We apply it everywhere that we're operating. So it's not exclusive to one setup or one formation or one field or anything like that. An injection well is pretty much an injection well when you're looking at a water flood, no matter where you're operating. So what we've found in using the system, or what drew us to using the system was the advantages to Merit. And we were able to retain high volume injection capabilities. We didn't need to put a liner in there if we couldn't get a leak to stop via cement. We were able to treat slow bleeds without needing to perforate or switch over to like a micro matrix cement. We were able to reduce work overtime and expense. That was a huge one because we don't need to drill out afterwards. We get immediate results. So in most cases, in a lot of cases, this will pass MIT almost immediately after they pump it. It's not always the case, and I'll show you a few results here, but what we have found is in order to do that, you shut in for a couple days, let that polymer kind of cure a little bit, settle down where it needs to, and then pressure back up on it in a day or two, and it's holding just fine. And then the tangible costs are very comparable to cement, but where, like I said, reducing the work over time, our intangible costs are significantly less than a cement squeeze. So looking at a few of the wells, this is the first one that we did, which is Phelps 25 in Spring Creek Field. This was an initial conversion to injection well. The pre-treatment data, we pressure tested for 500 to 500 PSI for 15 minutes. When we first converted it, it held just fine for us. So we waited for a state witness to come out there so that way they could sign off on it. And when that happened, which I think we were tying in flow line, so it was like a month later or whatnot, we noticed that it took 60 barrels to fill, 60 barrels of pack fluid to fill that annulus. And they went to pressure up on it, lost 50 PSI in 8 minutes, 100 PSI in 15 minutes. retried it a little bit later. Like I said, it was a long time between setting the downhole assembly and needing to actually get injection apparently on this one. But similar results. Lost 140 PSI in 15 minutes. This is an extremely slow bleed. The only way that we were going to be able to find this was going to be costly. We would have to go try to isolate various zones, get a true depth on it. So we were using where our initial fluid level was when we went to go test these to understand what our um, uppermost limit of those holes could be to ensure that when we went and laid this polymer plug on the backside that we would have it covered. But so the design notes that we gave them is that we suspected the leak was somewhere between 1,000 feet down measured depth and then TOC at 32, 30 MD. So we decided we were going to pump 63 barrels of that leak block HD across the full interval and then fill the rest of it with Packer fluid. So how we go about doing this is you go in and you pull, we had to pull our BHA at that point, and we run back in with a new packer, an on-off tool. And in the new packer, there's a burst disc that's set, I think, to 3,200 PSI. I don't know if I have the number on there. So what that allows us to do is to be able to circulate above the packer without having to go in and pull it afterwards. So we treated the well on July 27th, and we had a steady bleed off of 120 PSI for 15 minutes. We applied 500 PSI back to it, shut in the well for the weekend. So this one didn't pass immediately after we had pumped it. It took us 5 barrels to fill with Packer fluid on top of that plug. And then the final bleed off was 35 PSI in 15 minutes, which is within that 10% tolerance the state allows. So it was passed in front of a witness there, and it was a 1 day of cumulative operations. Well being shut in for the weekend didn't cost us anything. Immediately after that, we kind of looked at what that was. We realized what we are assuming, but 50% cost comparable cement squeeze is what that whole job ended up costing us. And it was 3 to 4 days less downtime and associated rig costs. So the post-treatment wellbore diagram here is showing that we have the plug balance between Packer fluid that's not highlighted on there, and then there's more Packer fluid on top of it. This system is mixed with Packer fluid as well, so you're not just getting just straight water where the gel is at. So the Texas Saunders 17 in Oregon Basin, the story on this one was an active injector with an expiring spinner survey variance. I know a lot of operators here used to have those to show all injected zones were going where we wanted them to, even though the backside wasn't holding that. The state has started to get away from approving those, and they really want the casing to be able to hold some sort of pressure on it. Our pre-treatment data, we had a cement squeeze in an area between 2,000 and 2,300 feet in 1994. That was successful, repaired. Came back, we knew we had issues, or we found more issues in 2019. Isolated additional casing integrity issues between 32 and 34. So we've got additional holes here. This is where the spinner variance was granted at that point. And then once that expired, we knew that we had to fix it. So we knew that the pre-existing squeeze, because we did do some isolation on there, was bleeding off 20 PSI in 15 minutes. That was within the tolerance, but that still doesn't give you the warm fuzzies that that's not going to break down in the near future. So what we decided to do on this one was a 2-stage treatment, and they went down and they isolated that lower casing issue where we were bleeding off 400 PSI in 2.5 minutes, and they displaced 35 barrels of leak block HD into the formation and allow it to cure. And then the second stage was going to go in and pump 200 barrels of that PAG system, also using the leak block HD across the entire interval of both leaks. So we're actually displacing it into the formation, and then we're going to go put a second plug on there to make sure that it won't break down and give us more assurance that this is going to hold over time, and it allows us to cover an interval that we know is already leaking a little bit above us. So the post-treatment data, so once they did the first stage, they pressured up to 840 PSI. They applied 300 PSI and shut the well in for the weekend because we were gonna come back and then do the second stage. But 3 days later, or when they came back to do the second stage, it was already holding within tolerance. So we could have shut down operations at that point and just did the first stage displacement into the formation. But the engineer who was running this decided that she wanted to be sure that no other leaks were going to develop. So she carried through with the second stage. So they pressure tested that to 340 PSI. It bled 10 PSI in 30 minutes and it passed the witness test right there on the spot. And so Polymer Technologies is still out there. They shut it in, pressured it up, and that one was good to go. This saved us 3 days of cumulative operations. And we saw that that MIT tolerance was achieved following that first stage, and the second stage was just insurance for us. That's why we like to having the option of being able to stop treatment mid-design, which could have further reduced costs. But we were able to to treat an additional 1,400 feet of known casing issues and potentially prevent future problems. Because this would have been a two-stage operation, cement squeeze down low, potentially another one up top, we're looking at about a 6 to 8 days less downtime and associated rig costs without having to drill out and get new packers and whatnot. We were able to retain our necessary injection capacity. I think this one has 3.5 in it, so we would have had to probably go down to 2 7/8 turn down if we were going to go to a 5.5 casing liner. And then we were able to improve the casing integrity of aging cement. The cause in 6 was an initial conversion to a disposal well. What this had, so we had 2 separate producing intervals that were squeezed during the CTI process. They were open perforations that were taking a lot of fluid. We elected to go with the cement squeeze ahead of time. So pre-treatment date on this was the first cement squeeze, the 10 sleep perforations, pressure tested to 510 PSI, bled 10 PSI in 15 minutes. Those were fine for what the state requires. And then the second one was our Amsden perforations because we were recompleting this and down only to the Madison. It pressure tested to 500 PSI, it bled 300 PSI in 7 minutes. So at this point, we could have gone in and tried to re-squeeze those Amsden perforations, but we already had a track record of success with stopping leaks of this size. And so we just went ahead and decided we were just going to set up the downhole for polymer, knowing that we're going to pump that before this is ever going to get approved. So we decided not to do a remedial squeeze. We pumped 15 barrels of this leak block HD across both intervals in the 5.5 liner. And we were able to get that PAG system to come to above that liner top, or just below the liner top, I guess. Well, on this one, our post-treatment data bled 10 PSI in 10 minutes. We shut the well in for the night with 490 PSI on the casing. That probably would have been within tolerance. And then we pressure up to 500 PSI. It bled 5 PSI in 5 minutes, manually bled it off. And then we went to do our state witnessed pressure test, and it was not bleeding it off at all in 15 minutes. So you see a progression of this polymer actually settling into place and creating better integrity over time. Because we decided right off the bat that we were going to go with the polymer, right after we did the squeeze job and set it up right there, I mean, it was only a half a day of operations that we needed for them to do this. And I think pumping is an hour and a half at most. So our realized cost savings on this one, we have a good comparison because we had initial squeeze jobs on this. This was less than 61% of what it cost us to do the initial squeeze jobs. 3 to 4 days less downtime, retain the necessary disposal capacity. This was critical because we were in a 5.5-inch liner and we're trying to make it a disposal well. And we have the option now to go to, 4.5-inch flush joint if we want for our casing. We just put in the 3.5 tubing right now because we only needed about 7,000 barrels to relieve the system of our water handling constraints. So at another time, we'll be able to go in and upsize that tubing if we want to. We aided the casing integrity of the cement with minor bleed off, and we can ensure the integrity of the liner top. I might need to update that wellbore diagram because I'm pretty sure we put that above the liner top on that well. And then we won't go in great detail with the rest of these, but just kind of showing you the same setups and what we were looking at with these wells. We had a history of casing integrity issues in this Ehrlich 41 with multiple recent cement squeeze attempts to regain integrity, and all of them were unsuccessful. So pressure or the pre-treatment data on there, we were pumping 0.8 barrels per minute at 600 PSI up high at 660 to 800 feet measured depth. And then I won't read this whole thing off. But we can see what we were looking at the end of this was we lost 120 PSI in 30 seconds and holding 180 PSI for 20 minutes. So it was holding something, but anytime you pressured up above it, it was opening back up and pushing back out. So we pumped 20 barrels of that leak block HD, displaced it with 5 barrels of packer fluid, and it held and passed tests immediately after pumping it. So it was able to succeed right there where the cement was not. Hamilton Dome was an active injector, failed casing integrity, located shallow holes, 980 to 1100, pump rate 1.5 barrel per minute, 700 PSI. As these progressed and we got further on, or we've done more and more of these, we've kind of taken the approach of why don't we just put the entire system from the top of the packer to the surface? And that way, if we do have another issue, it's not going to lose pressure integrity or whatnot, and just kind of gives us some more insurance. So 75 barrels of a leak block HD, 14 barrels excess, and we squeezed some through the holes in the casing, and it held immediately following. And then similar story with the Phosphoria 120, 24. And then once again, we just decided to go all the way to the surface, and it held immediately. So the question that is inevitably going to get asked here is, what is the success rate on it? These are the 6 that we've pumped. All 6 of them have worked. So right now it's 100%. And in most cases, it's when cement has failed or isn't working is when we are seeing this PAG system really accelerate. So taking a look at the overall, what the implications are for the finances on here. Merit's performed 25 plus casing repairs in the Bighorn Basin since 2019. Our cement squeeze, our minimum cost was $50,000 on that. That's when everything goes smooth and you're able to drill it out and it works perfect how you envision it. Our average cost is $122,000 for this, and that's primarily because the cement squeezes don't work on the first. A lot of the time, don't work on the first try, or we elected not to perforate and couldn't get it back out there. So we see an average of 122,000, and then some of them where there's several squeeze attempts, 190,000. You can approach 200,000 on there. And then liners, just with the cost of the casing itself, you're looking at north of 150 starting, and we unfortunately have an instance where we were near $500,000 for a liner, and that was because we had multiple failed squeeze attempts beforehand and realized we weren't going to get it, went in and ran a liner. And so when we're not doing any of the drill outs and we're having the 100% success rate and we're not having to do multiple squeeze attempts, you can see where the cost savings are very beneficial to Merit. So.
All right, I think we're ready to go here. Our third and final industry collaborative project presentation for today is the Alpha Field Enriched Air EOR project. This project is an innovative collaborative initiative with ATR partners aimed at enhancing oil recovery by utilizing enriched air injection techniques at the Alpha Field in the Minalissa Reservoir located in Campbell County. Presenting are the president and CEO of ATR Partners and Principal Petroleum, Scott Dobson, and the founder of Zion Energy, Scott Ellingson. Scott Dobson has over 28 years of oil and gas industry experience. primarily focused on the exploitation of oil and gas assets throughout the lower 48 states. Scott Ellingson is a highly experienced geologist who has worked on conventional assets for the past 15 years throughout the Rocky Mountain region. Please welcome Scott Dobson and Scott Ellingson.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation to come speak about the project. I've got really probably three goals. One is to talk about the project on a high level. It's extremely technical, but that doesn't. If you guys have questions at the end, we're going to reserve I think about 15 or 20 minutes. The second one is really to highlight the importance of enhanced oil recovery. You know, I think it's been set aside, you know, and not really that it's fallen out of popularity, but with the emergence of the resource plays, that's really been the focus for the last probably 15 years, right? But now even the resource plays are looking to EOR. So EOR is reemerging as a topic. And probably lastly is to highlight the importance of both the WEA and the foresight of Wyoming for starting the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute. I mean, it's one of a kind. I live in Texas. I grew up in Montana, went to Montana Tech, but Wyoming is the state we hold up as an example of what a state can do to really encourage innovation and adoption of new technology. Let me see if this thing is not very dark. So a little bit about the company. Principal Petroleum is a company I started in 2013, really to focus on exploitation. What Principal does is we start smaller businesses or companies, and then we manage those businesses. So you'll hear or you'll see my contact information say Principal Petroleum. I'm the president and CEO of Principal Petroleum. And Principal was part of a partnership to launch ATR Partners specifically to focus on enhanced oil recovery using enriched air injection. We launched it in 2021, not the best year to launch a company, if anybody remembers 2021. But we founded the company, again, specifically to focus on enriched air injection and EOR in Wyoming. And this is entirely focused on Wyoming. Why Wyoming is a question we get often. The regulatory environment, industry support through either the WEA or the EORI is huge. And then we've worked this area for a long time. So we understand the Wyoming reservoirs, world-class oil reservoirs that have had a lot of different techniques applied to recover oil, but there's a lot of oil left in the ground, which we'll talk a little bit more about here in a bit. 2022, we started working with the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute. Can you hear me in the back? Good? Okay. You can't hear me in the back? Okay. We started working with the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute specifically on this project, and we'll get into why, you know, what's important about the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute, what they bring to small companies like Principal and ATR. And then in 2023 is really when we kind of finished our engineering and design. We started a field test of the equipment that we're using, which is not typically used in the oil industry. So we're taking air separation equipment, taking air, removing nitrogen, and injecting roughly 93 plus or minus 3% oxygen. So it's a new technique modifying an old technique. So a lot of people think of air injection, that's a thermal process. And the reason it's thermal is because it's got so much nitrogen contained in air, right? So if we remove the nitrogen, this process becomes both thermal and it uses CO2, which is created underground to recover more oil. So in 2023, we finished a test of the equipment to prove that we could really reduce the cost of creating air, enriched air, oxygen. 2024, we applied for a grant with the WEA. We were fortunate and very grateful to get that grant. And what it did is it allowed us to accelerate this work. If you look at the past 10 to 15 years, the oil industry has been a popular investment for private equity, large family offices, institutional capital. But what's happened is a lot of that, unfortunately, the value of that was destroyed with resource plays that didn't work. So if you fast forward to today, capital from private equity and even large family offices is, I wouldn't call it picky, but it's very focused. It's focused on things that are not necessarily low risk, but proven cash flow.
or the best resource plays. So EOR is not really a particular business strategy that is easy to fund, right? So we have great investors that are interested in this technology. Partnering with the WEA allowed us to move on this project faster. So in 2024, once we finished up the grant process, we actually got started on the alpha field. So we'll start talking about the alpha field here in a bit. About a year later, we finished the construction, drilled some wells, built out the plant, and we started injection of enriched air in May. So what is enriched air injection, EOR? So I already touched on this a bit. Atmospheric air contains roughly 78% nitrogen. Well, nitrogen's not miscible in almost every application. Now the Merit guys are going to tell me it works. That's deep oil and it's light and it's hot. But if you look at the fields in Wyoming, there's not a nitrogen flood, right? Nitrogen doesn't work. It's not miscible. And that was a kind of the Achilles heel of traditional atmospheric air injection, is it contained a lot of nitrogen. So if we remove the nitrogen from the equation because oxygen is what's doing the work, it creates a chemical reaction, oxidation. It's exothermic. That means it creates heat. And that process creates CO2. So the primary difference between air and enriched air is the CO2 that's created underground is miscible or partially miscible. So we're basically going to a remote site, building out a plant that will take atmospheric air, remove the nitrogen, inject oxygen, and that creates CO2. We don't have to build a pipeline. We don't need CO2 infrastructure. And we're creating in situ CO2. Now there's a secondary benefit. There's heat. And in that process, the oil's upgraded. Now that upgrading process, because of the heat and the pressure, makes the CO2 more miscible. So initially, your miscibility is, I'd call it partial miscibility of CO2, and the CO2 is not as effective, but after months of operation, the miscibility amount increases, so the CO2 is more effective. So here's our cartoon of what's going on. We have an oxygen or air separation plant. We're injecting oxygen, creates oxidation, in a combustion zone that creates CO2. We're also creating syngas. So these fields, typically this is a Menalusa field. They don't have gas. They don't have a lot of gas in the field. We end up creating gas through a gasification process. That gas is predominantly CO2, but it also contains methane, increased amounts of methane, and hydrogen. Up until this point, everything's fairly normal. We take and process the gas and the water and the oil. We sell the oil. The syngas ultimately gets processed, and this is optional, right? We're going to take the syngas, and this whole process is optional. Is there a beneficial use for the syngas? Initially, we will likely just re-inject it, but ultimately, when we reach full scale, the syngas will get processed, and we'll re-inject all of the CO2 into the gas cap that we've created. Or, I mean, it's possible we could use it at a neighboring reservoir or other EOR purposes, but currently that's the plan for this project. Why now? You know, how did this just come up now? I think this is a theoretical concept that's been around for a long time, taking oxygen instead of air to create EOR. The problem is the costs or the economics of it. So up until probably about 10 years ago, maybe 15, to do one of these projects, you had to build a very large air separation plant. And that's a very large upfront capital cost, which usually means you need a very large field, a very robust infrastructure of power nearby. All of those are challenging to implementing this type of project. So in 2008, the team that's currently part of ATR, we tested the concept in California. We used liquid oxygen. So we were trucking liquid oxygen, cryogenic oxygen out to the field. It was like 99% oxygen, so very high concentration. And for 2 years, we injected that and we got response. It was a very successful technical project. We've written an SPE paper about it, so you can go out and find that publicly. The problem was, and this is hard to read, but you can see that the cost of that oxygen was about $30 an MCF. depending on the field where we do this, we're expecting to get a barrel to half a barrel of oil per MCF. So our air oil ratio, if we pick the right candidate, is like a 1-to-1, right? With this $30 an MCF, that's expensive, right? Those are because then you add on just the lifting costs, so we're another $15 a barrel, and you have overhead, and your break-even costs are up in the $50, $60 a barrel. What we've identified and implemented is we take very efficient air separation technology, and we tested this at the Stewart Field. So we own two fields currently in the Powder River Basin, the Stewart Field and the Alpha Field. And there's a long story to why we did the test at Stewart. Stewart is a federal unit with very few federal wells and very few federal tracks. So almost the entire field we're dealing with the Oil and Gas Commission and not the BLM. And at the time, if you remember, we launched the company in 2021, a little bit different, the transition period of the Biden administration taking over. So that caused us to switch from doing the test and the pilot at Alpha, and we did the equipment test at Stewart and moved on to the pilot at Alpha. Nonetheless, what we did is we proved that we could create oxygen for about $3 an MCF. So the operating costs were right in the range of $2 to $3 an MCF to create the oxygen and inject it. So that includes compression. So in 2024, we moved from the Stewart field test that was really focused on equipment and proving that the cash flows would work to a commercial pilot at Alpha. We have partnered, thankfully, with the WEA. We have a $9.85 million matching funds grant. I guess we rounded up here. We also have two patents. So we have a patent called FEAT, Fog Enriched Air Transportation. That's really based on how do we take what's high concentration, high pressure oxygen and transport it down a wellbore effectively without risk to the equipment. Another one called SEER, which is Structural Enriched Air Recovery. We were awarded those in 2024. One of the big things we did with Alpha, and we partnered with EORI on this, is we did a 3D seismic shoot. And so I'm an engineer. I'm usually not a proponent for seismic, but really Lon and his group, and we'll talk more about the seismic in a bit, really felt like, and Scott Ellingson was part of this, if these fields are typically drilled on 40-acre spacing. And engineer, I'm like, we got plenty of subsurface well control. We know what the field looks like. What you'll see is we did not. And these types of projects, it's important to understand the subsurface geometry, the reservoir character, because where we drill our injection is extremely important and critical to the success of the project. So at Alpha, one of the steps to getting this started was doing a 3D seismic survey and then tightening up the well spacing, right? So for this type of project, 40-acre spacing on a pilot was not adequate. So we wanted to get down to like 10-acre spacing. This type of technology or project also using old wells, and the ex-oil guys hit on this, is you can do it in certain cases in producers if they're down dip, but for the area where you're creating your gas attic, you really need modern wells, right? And so we had to drill an injector that was designed for what we're doing, right? And the wells that were drilled in the 80s, this is a newer Menalusa field, were not appropriate. One of the big things that is worth pointing out is, and I'll cover it in more detail, is the reason we ended up with Alpha and Stewart. Those were 2 of 116 pre-screened fields in Wyoming. One of the really great things about Wyoming is Wyoming does a great job of keeping data and making it publicly available. And whether that's through the EORI or the Oil and Gas Commission, there's a lot of data out there where we've gone through and done detailed studies to find fields that we've moved into this tier 1 category where we think there's a high likelihood that this type of process could work. Stewart and Alpha, based on size and proximity to one another and a willing seller, were at the top of that list, and so we acquired those fields. Okay, so why should we care about enriched air injection? Well, most people, when they think of EOR or enhanced oil recovery, they think of CO2 flooding. That's really probably the most predominant, certainly in Wyoming, predominant and successful enhanced oil recovery technique. There's chemical flooding, there's other things that have been implemented, but CO2 has its limitations. We all know that. If you look at this map, and again, EORI was kind enough to make this for us, and Scott, I don't want to leave you out. What you'll see is that these are all Minnelusa fields, and there's a variation in API gravity. And so to really simplify it, these pinkish, I don't know what to call this, color, basically south of Gillette, are likely really good CO2 candidates because the CO2 is going to be miscible because this oil is light. When you move into these green fields, I would say some of those could be good CO2 flooding candidates, but many of them will not be. And all of these 12 to 23 gravity fields, I would argue, are not good CO2 flooding candidates. And I shouldn't say it won't work, but the economics will be so poor that it wouldn't be a field that you would go initiate a CO2 project in. That's independent of the fact that the pipeline is, these are 25 lines on the pipeline that would supply the CO2. So, typically CO2 candidates get implemented in larger fields, closer to pipelines, closer to infrastructure. And so what we're pursuing, and we probably should have highlighted somehow Alpha and Stewart on here. Yeah, I don't know, somewhere up in here, is these smaller to medium-sized fields that won't have a excellent EOR candidate to pursue. And from a number standpoint, what does that mean? If you look at the fields that have an API gravity, well, if you look at the 116 fields that we've targeted or screened, the average API gravity of those is 22, right? So that's not really a great CO2 candidate. The remaining oil in place, approximately, of those fields is 3.9 billion barrels. So to date, that's probably about 30% of the oil, right? So if we were to find a way to recover an additional 30% of that oil, that's 1.2 billion barrels. 1.2 billion barrels at $50 net receipt price results in $7.8 billion of tax revenue on severance and ad val alone. And then if you layer in what our cost is, and I'm not suggesting, don't take me wrong, I'm not suggesting ATR would be able to do 116 fields in my lifetime. But even if you take these numbers and split them in half, and this becomes an industry accepted way to develop these fields, the development and operation cost is about $21 a barrel. So CapEx plus OpEx is 21, even $30 a barrel. That's $2.5 trillion of investment into those 116 fields that currently will likely be abandoned in the next decade, unless somebody finds a way to use an enhanced oil recovery technique that doesn't include CO2. For the technical folks, why alpha? And this generally relates to how we screen fields, right? So high quality reservoir, the Minnelusa has high permeability, high porosity. We need a reservoir that has a high quality, kind of tier 1 reservoir. Porosity is important. That's kind of an economic thing. The bigger the pore space, the more the pore volume has oil in it, right? So if the pore spaces are smaller, the recovery tends to be more challenging. Permeability, we're injecting air and moving oil. That requires a certain amount of permeability. Crude oil is asphaltic and sour. So why is that important? If oil is too light, you actually move too much of the oil and you don't leave any fuel. So you can't actually do this process in a light reservoir. So sometimes we get the question, could you do this in place of a CO2 flood? And it's kind of a maybe answer, but in general, the light oil doesn't provide enough fuel for the process to keep occurring, right? You move too much oil out of the pore space and the oxygen's not effective. On the other end of the spectrum, it can be too heavy, and which means you can have too much fuel. So then the oxygen consumes too much fuel, and the economics aren't as attractive. Alpha is one of these fields where the current remaining oil is about 60%, right? So even after primary production, water flooding, there's 60% of the oil still in the ground. It's an anticlinal structure or somewhat of a pinch out trap with a structural component to it. To have a little bit of a structure is a key component of this process because we want the gas to be high and we want to almost like a plunger move the oil down to lower producers. The reservoir can't be too thick, it can't be too deep, it can't be too thin. So there's kind of a three little bear, or what is it, Goldilocks? Yeah, it's kind of that scenario, right? Too hot, too cold, what's just right? And we've got, something that's kind of thick but not too thick, and something that's, deeper than 3,000 feet, but not 10,000 feet deep. Alpha in particular is pilot sized, right? It's a good project. It is going to yield a great deal of revenue if this is successful, but it's 20 million barrels of original oil in place. From an acreage standpoint, I think it's at 435, 430-ish acres. So from a footprint standpoint, it's much easier to manage. And I'll move to the next slide. What we did to set this up is after shooting seismic, and this is somewhat of the 3D story. As an engineer, we decided prior to doing the seismic, let's drill this 13-1R. We think that's where the high point of the structure is. And embarrassingly, it was not. And this has happened to me before where engineers are confident, and I pretend to be a geologist occasionally. But we drilled this well and it came in low, so this happens often. In hindsight, we said, okay, we need to shoot seismic and figure out exactly where the high point of the structure is. We shot the seismic, redefined the field with the help of the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute, and we said, okay, we're gonna set up a five spot pattern. We drilled this 111 injection well, knowing that now this was the high point of the structure. We offset it with our current producer, right? We already had drilled this well. We drilled another producer down dip. We reactivated this well. It had good enough casing design and it's far enough down dip that we felt like it would be an adequate producer. And then this was an existing producer. So we currently have these 4 wells surrounding the enriched air injection well. And then down dip, this used to be a water injection well. We made that idle and we turned it into a monitoring well. So we record pressure data in that, which has been extremely interesting and will be extremely valuable for simulations in the future. And then this used to be a producing well. We converted that to an idle pressure monitoring well as well. So we're capturing data in all of the producers, down dip in these wells. And then the air injection well has fiber optic cable cemented on the production casing on the backside. So we're capturing a temperature profile in real time so that we can see how this combustion process is moving up and down the wellbore. So our first, milestone, what are we trying to accomplish? We want to establish that enriched air injection can be successful and economic as an enhanced oil recovery technique. That's the goal of this first phase of this pilot. The second milestone is we'll start expanding this field, continue to drill wells on 10 to 20 acre spacing. Right now we're injecting 250 to 500 MCF a day. That's 10 to 20 tons. So we have 2 small air plants. Each plant processes enough air to make 10 to 20 tons or 250 MCF a day each. We'll ramp that up to probably 1 million cubic feet a day of air injection. And that's really the development plan for Alpha. And of course, we'll move back to our Stewart field and start implementing this process there. This is what it looks like, right? It's some people want to see a picture. It's probably less impressive, but that's the point. It's small footprint. These plants are built, they're built in California. They're tested in California. They're DoD, a lot of the application of these air plants is for the DoD. So they're mil spec plants. They have a very high tolerance or low tolerance application. But they don't like cold weather, they don't like snow, and they don't like rain. So we put them inside buildings, and that's where they're housed. So each one of these has a 10-ton per day plant, and they have a compressor that's suitable to take oxygen from 100 pounds and compress it up to 2,500 pounds. That's a specialty, right? That's not, you're not going to go to Ingersoll Rand or CAT and get that compressor. Those are unique. Inside the building, it has to process air. So these buildings have a lot of ventilation. And we took some guys on a tour yesterday. There's two reasons. We have to have clean air so that we can process efficiently, so that we can get enough oxygen out of the air. So we can't build up nitrogen because these plants take in air and they reject nitrogen. The second thing is inside the building, we need a lot of ventilation because humans like a certain amount of oxygen and they have a very low tolerance for a lot of nitrogen, right? So these buildings have ventilation to pull air across the top of our plant so that we always have clean air going into the air plant and we have clean air in the building. This up here is our injection site. It's deliberately away from our plant. This is a high pressure gas injection well, right? So we don't really want that right next to where our personnel are, our control room. Those are all safety features. These are cryogenic CO2 skids. This is all kind of completion based. That's their short term. Long term, we don't have CO2 on site, but it's for the initial part of the completion of these wells or the air injection well. And then we have a water treatment plant. So we add water in to the injection stream. Really, it's to create a foam or a fog. So we have a gas bubble surrounded by liquid. And so there's a little bit of surfactant that goes into this stream. But we have to treat the water because what you have to think about is a combustion triangle. We're taking oxygen and adding in, we don't want to add in fuel because we're already adding in heat processing the air, right? So you want the fuel, which is all downhole, and the oxygen to take place where there's heat, right? So you don't want any of that anywhere other than the reservoir. So water's added in as somewhat of a safety and corrosion feature, corrosion prevention feature. So here's pre-seismic, here's post-seismic. This is obviously a function of gridding. I should make Ellingson talk about this, but you can see the change, right? The broadness of the structure, where it was structurally thick and high, the fact that it pinches out rapidly on the edges versus this kind of rollover. And so this was a big change or a big piece of the puzzle to setting up the development plan for this field, was having 3D seismic, and in particular, having the involvement of the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute to history match and model the water flood so we could better understand the reservoir and apply that, what we learned, to a gas injection project. It was particularly helpful having their expertise with the Menalusa, right? We've worked Menalusa fields, but not as many Menalusa fields as the folks at the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute have. So getting this work done with the help of the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute was extremely valuable. EORI collaboration in the future. So what are we envisioning going forward with the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute? Right now, we share every bit of data we can with the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute. And it's an enormous amount of data. What EORI will pursue is history matching and then simulating this process. And that's no small task, right? All of the stuff that there's multiple chemical reactions taking place with what we're doing. So a history match alone is going to be challenging. A simulation following that and make it actually match what we've been seeing in the field with the data we have is challenging. It requires an enormous amount of computing power. Luckily, as we've talked about earlier, that's changed with cloud computing. There's very specialized and almost single software source to do this. And there's a level of expertise, right? You have to have somebody who not only knows simulation, but knows combustion simulation. You know, simulating water floods and CO2 floods is one thing. There's only a few variables. The number of variables that take place with this project is exponentially higher. So it becomes more and more challenging. So the value to ATR is we do not have that expertise, right? That is not, we're more development guys. We have been focused on drilling wells and completing wells and how do we make this process safe. But then how do we take what we've learned and then apply it to these other candidates, right? Because we're going to learn something. We've already had a few surprises. So how do we then take what we've learned so that more operators or people that we would like to partner with can see how to implement this type of project in different fields, right? So the simulation, if we can get it accurate on Alpha and in the future accurate on Stewart, we can apply that knowledge to other fields and share that knowledge with our partners. I'll end with this, and this is really, you know, when Lon put this together, I think the intent was to obviously share some of the innovation and the projects that EORI is involved with, but it's also to highlight the value of the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute and also what Wyoming is doing with the WEA and the matching funds grants. You know, so it was an easy yes. I mean, the help that we've gotten from Lon and his group and Rob and his group and his team has been huge to getting this project started. So, you know, how do we see that? Well, innovation, if you think about it, often comes from small businesses. Exxon can do this, right? They can obviously do it. They don't because it probably doesn't move the needle, right? They have other big things that they do. And if you can think back to other technologies, even the resource plays themselves started with small companies because small companies, small ideas or big ideas on a smaller scale move the needle, right? But there's challenges to that. We can have a compelling idea. We can have a level of expertise, but there are pieces that we're missing. And usually that expertise is expensive, right? You can hire contractors from all over the world to help you with this. Often it's expensive and they're difficult to find. They also don't have the domain expertise that you have with the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute, right? The Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute is focused on Wyoming. If I hire a reservoir engineer down in Houston, they've probably got a ton of experience. They've worked all over the world. That's the point. They've worked all over the world. They haven't worked the Menalusa to the degree that the EORI has. The second thing, or maybe the third, you know, you combine these things, compelling idea, expertise. Usually the team has passion about their idea. Often that's not the case with the expertise that you consult, right? I mean, they're passionate for you to succeed only in that it affects their business, maybe. But the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute is on, you know, they're on our team. They want us to succeed. They're here to collaborate, not just get paid. Right? That's different. That's a different kind of expertise. And this project is extremely complex. You know, so we've looked at it internally from a lot of different views, but having another partner that's looking at this and viewing it from a historical perspective of the fields that we're focused on is extremely valuable. So Lon, we thank you guys. Rob, we thank you for your partnership in helping us get this off the ground. We're excited. We're about 3 months into injection, so we're probably a quarter or two away from having an idea of how well this is going to work. So, you know, end of the year, we'll probably have more news to share, and we don't know what venue we'll do that in, but looking forward to updating everybody in the future.
Well, I hope you enjoyed those 3 industry partner presentations. Again, just a reminder, those are 3 of 18 current projects EORI is working on with industry, collaborative projects, all types of projects. We do have We're working on 8 fields with 4 operators on CO2 floods. We didn't get into any of that today. There's a lot of development that direction as well. We've got a variety of formations that besides Muddy and Minnelusa, we're into Sussex and Shannon frontier. So we're covering a lot of area in Wyoming, all basins. If you have any questions, I want you to feel free to reach out to us. There's all kinds of contact information. Back of this booklet has everyone's contact info. We'd love to hear from you. We like to expand our base of operation, meet new operators, and we're thrilled that there's so many people in here that we've worked with for so many years. And I'd like to thank specifically some of the folks that are here. Representative Knapp had to leave, but we appreciated him being here. Senator Barlow, Representative Colston are all with us. Also, the chairman of the Wyoming Energy Authority, Wanda Burgett, has joined us today. So it's great to see this audience and help people understand how we work, what we do, and give you a little snapshot of the types of projects we do. I'd also like to mention that we had some really great sponsors and supporters for this event, to the point no cost, no state money was used to provide it, this entire event for no cost to anyone coming. So we're very pleased, and I want to thank those sponsors that are here. Some of them weren't able to come, but Citation, we've worked for many, many years with Citation over the years, and we're really pleased to see them here and thank them for their support and sponsorship. Merit Energy, True Oil. True Oil's been a long time supporter and partner with EORI. If you come to some of our events in Casper, those EOR insights that we have quarterly, they provide their room there, the True River Commons, for us to have all those meetings at no cost. So we keep our costs low, and we really appreciate the support and years of partnership with True Oil. Kennedy Oil, Contango Oil and Gas, those they weren't able to be here, but certainly a supporter and sponsor of this event. Sunshine Valley Petroleum, that's working on the X-Oil project. Jonah Energy, TR Operating. You've heard from ATR Partners now. Also Pete Obermueller and the Petroleum Association of Wyoming. A lot of collaboration, growing collaboration with PAW, specifically in the incentivizing EOR in Wyoming. A lot of work with the Joint Minerals Committee this summer as a focus area for that committee. Some great hearings and collaborative work with PAW, EORI, Oil and Gas Commission, and WEA. The mayor who had needed to slip out, we appreciate Mayor Lundvall coming. Tom Kropatch, the Oil and Gas Commission, and again, Rob Krieger and the Wyoming Energy Authority. So I'd like everyone to give a hand to all those sponsors and supporters. You saw a bit of our team. I just would like to acknowledge the incredible team we have at EORI. Not quite all of them are here today, but we're very fortunate. And it is an unusual professional step going to work someplace like the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute. I'm a petroleum engineer by training. I go back a ways. University of Wyoming, Colorado School of Mines. Most of my professional career was with Tenneco, but I went to EORI in 2005, so it was quite early on in the beginnings of the Institute, and became director about 3 years ago. And it's quite an honor to end a career doing something like this, where the ultimate benefit is for the citizens of Wyoming, for the state of Wyoming. Our goal every day is to increase that tax revenue back, and you see how we do that. So I think the operators are very pleased. There's great success. Everything we do isn't perfect, and not everything turns out exactly the way we'd like it. But I think having that third eye, or the second eye on these projects with the people we have at EORI, is quite a benefit for the industry. So I want to acknowledge the team and the people that helped particularly put this together, and our commissioners, and we've talked about them earlier. We're very fortunate to have such an engaged commission. They have a third quarter EORC meeting right here this afternoon. You're certainly you're able to stay if you'd like. to see how that commission works. They're going to have a little luncheon here in a minute with some of the legislators that are with us. Just that intermingling interaction, and I think that's really critical for us. But we're very grateful for the commission and the support you give our team and for me, um, and the work of the legislature. We spent most of the summer on joint minerals hearings, and there's some great work that's coming out on how to incentivize EOR. You see all these projects and opportunities. It's just getting them done. Our state's very progressive. Um, I think people have mentioned that on a number of these talks, that Wyoming is a great place to work. And what's really nice we're not a regulatory group and we're not a legislative um, bill writing group, but we can provide data that's important for the legislators to move things forward, understand what they're working on, and we're very pleased to be involved at the level we are. So I thank those legislators that came and were able to benefit a little bit from this today, and hopefully you can stay for the little luncheon here in a minute. So with that, I thought it might be interesting for you to hear a little bit, what did an operator think about this meeting? So I asked Laura Nicholas, who's the reservoir engineering manager from True. Laura's been involved with EORI for a number of years. She's on our technical advisory board. And she's been here all day listening to these talks, and she bring a little interesting perspective to you from an operator. And we'd appreciate any feedback you guys have. Reach out to me, any of us. Was this helpful? What would you have liked to have seen? What would you like to see next time? I've been asked twice today if we'll do another of these in Gillette. We'd be glad to do these in Gillette. I think that's part of our mission. It's a clear part of our statute. These kinds of events are things we want to do and need to do. So we're happy to do another of these annually, whatever. It's important to hear what you guys need to know, what you'd like to hear about. So reach out and let us know. But welcome Laura Nicholas now, and let's see some thoughts from Laura.
So thank you, Lon, for that kind introduction. As he said, my name is Laura Nicholas, and I'm the Reservoir Engineering Supervisor for True Oil LLC, as well as a member of the Technical Advisory Board for the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute. True Oil is a family-owned exploration and production company that has operated in Wyoming for over 70 years. True Oil not only operates wells across the state, but as many of you know, the True Company's main headquarters remain in Wyoming. True Oil has collaborated on projects with EORI over the years, and True Oil employees participate in many EORI educational and knowledge sharing events, which give us the opportunity to learn from the many collaborations between EORI and Wyoming operators. These innovative projects are important not only to Wyoming operators, but also to the state of Wyoming, because these collaborations have the potential to reduce stranded reserves, extend the economic lifespan of Wyoming fields, and increase state revenue through incremental production. I want to take a few minutes to reflect on what we've heard, and most importantly, to thank some of the people who made this event possible. We begin this morning with a warm welcome from Mayor Shay Lundvall. Mayor, thank you for grounding today's conversations in the bigger picture. Your words reminded us that enhanced oil recovery is not just about technology or economics. It's about strengthening Wyoming communities and ensuring that this industry continues to support families and local businesses for generations to come. The first collaborative presentation we saw focused on the Skull Creek Field NGL EOR project. Thank you to Elio Dean from X-Oil and Steve Whitaker from EORI for walking us through the progress that's been made creating detailed reservoir maps to better define where the injection of NGLs could significantly increase oil recovery in the Skull Creek Field in Weston County. What stood out to me was the balance of technical rigor combined with the plan to test it with a field pilot. Advancing potential projects past the theoretical stage has an increased potential to create real value for operators and for our state. The next presentation described the protective annual gel system workover procedure to repair casing leaks in injection wells, presented by Troy Skitt from Merit Energy and Daniel French from Polymer Technologies. And also Nick Jones from EORI. This project addressed a challenge that nearly every operator has faced at some point, casing integrity. The innovative use of polymers represents an approach that has the potential to be both practical and forward-thinking. What impressed me most was not only the technical details, but the collaborative spirit behind this project, combining the efforts of Merit Energy, a Wyoming operator, Polymer Technologies, an experienced service company, and EORI working together to try to solve this problem in a more cost-effective manner. Finally, we heard from Scott Dobson from Principal Petroleum and Scott Ellingson of Zion Energy, who shared the progress towards the Alpha Field Enriched Air EOR project. Their presentation showcased a creative approach to unlocking new recovery potential in legacy fields through enriched air injection. It was encouraging to me to see the progress on this project, and I look forward to seeing the future results. When we step back and we look at all of these collaborative projects we've heard today, a clear theme emerges. Progress happens when we share knowledge, when we're willing to test ideas in the field, and when we commit to working together. These projects require operators willing to think outside the box and take risks, and organizations like EORI to do what they do best, providing resources, industry context, and specialized technical knowledge, truly partnering with Wyoming operators. That's the real value of today's forum. Each of us leaves here with new ideas, new connections, and perhaps even new solutions we can apply in our own operations. So once again, thank you to our speakers, Mayor Lundvall, EORC Commissioner Paul Ulrich, Elio Dean, Steve Whitaker, Troy Skitt, Daniel French, Nick Jones, Scott Dobson, and Scott Ellingson. And a very special thank you to Lon Whitman and the entire EORA team. Your commitment to Wyoming's oil and gas industry is what makes this kind of collaboration possible. We're fortunate to have your unique perspective, knowledge, and your passion driving these efforts forward for the benefit of Wyoming. Finally, thanks to all of you for attending this forum, for your time, your engagement, and your willingness to be a part of this community of innovators and problem solvers. There will always be challenges in our industry, but when Wyoming operators and EORI work together, we can identify solutions that have the potential to strengthen our industry, our communities, and our state. I look forward to seeing the continued progress of these projects, and I hope we'll gather again soon to share even more innovative ideas and projects. For those of you that traveled today to be here, safe travels and thanks again for your attendance.
Thanks again. We're around a little bit if you have any questions, but feel free to reach out. Take a look on our website. There's a ton of information, and my chairman has a question. Sure. I'll start in the very back because I can see Paul Davis, Senior Petroleum Geologist. Nick Jones is standing there in the back, Senior Petroleum Geologist. Steve Whitaker that you saw in the presentation. Amitabh Garg, it's brand new. Amitabh came to Casper from Anchorage. Lots of background in EOR and IOR with BP. So we're thrilled to have Amitabh. And Roger, Deputy Director. Roger leads that data and operations side. Sritran Lee, Petroleum Engineer, Senior Petroleum Engineer. Lots of focus in modeling. And Kelly is back at the desk, hiding. And Kelly, you've interfaced a lot with if you get involved in some of the online mapping services we have, including Pipeline. I didn't mention that earlier. When the Pipeline Authority closed in 2022, EORI offered to take the data from the Wyoming Pipeline Authority and safeguard it at EORI. We brought their entire system and data to EORI. We've updated, kept that up to date and secure. And we have a whole section in our website about pipeline routings, etc. We were also fortunate to bring Brian Jeffries onto our team at EORI. He's not here today, but Brian is a pipeline commercial advisor, joined our team with a collaboration through the Wyoming Energy Authority. So that pipeline and questions around pipeline, we don't get into technical work. We don't do feed studies and that type of thing, but we're a wealth of information on pipelines in Wyoming routing, including the Wyoming Pipeline Corridor Initiative. That's quite a valuable document. Where are there routings? Whether there's room existing for new pipelines, you avoid some of the regulatory challenges of pipelines if you have a route that already exists. Kelly does a lot of that. She's GIS manager for us, and obviously very helpful with our outreach and greeting people, and lots of great work. I think Shane in the corner. Shane's our data architect. Data is critical at EORI. We use the data that you all use, Oil and Gas Commission, Wyoming Geological, and we internally QC that so that the projects we're working on have the best data available. So Shane and his background and the data team, Vandy Jones isn't here, she's another, and our business manager, Gabe Tullis. I believe that's the entire team. As I said, we're 11 and getting a lot done. We hope to do more and continue to provide that great revenue to the state and to the people of Wyoming. Thank you again. We appreciate it and we'd love to hear from you.